Dollar store cola. Gotta love it. Hey Brian, how's it going? I'm actually kind of glad you revisited this subject because I meant to, as I think I mentioned to you at the time, I meant to respond to you the last time this subject came up because I had quite a few things to say, but just got sidetracked and never got around to it. The whole subject of Blu-ray and what can or cannot benefit from being put on Blu-ray. As I think I've explained before, and I think you may be a little bit confused on a couple of points, so I'll see if I can clarify some things for you. As I explained before, essentially, whether or not something is a prime candidate for Blu-ray, meaning whether or not something would benefit from being put on Blu-ray, really depends on the quality of the source material that's available. The problem is with a lot of the cartoons and TV shows that you and I are big fans of, namely the stuff from the 80s and 90s, is that particular era of television production, the vast majority of shows being done, while they may have been shot on film, were actually edited and mastered on standard definition videotape. Now I need to clarify, by standard definition videotape, we're not talking VHS here, or Betamax, or anything like that. Those are consumer formats. Those were never, ever used for broadcast, editing or production or anything like that. No, the kind of formats we're talking about are 1-inch broadcast master tape, or Betacam SP, not Betamax, Betacam. Completely different format. Yes, both made by Sony, but Betacam is a broadcast format at broadcast quality resolution. Betamax is a consumer format strictly for home video. It's about half the resolution of what you get on actual broadcast videotape. Same goes for VHS. VHS was actually a little bit lower resolution than broadcast videotape, and as such. The closest consumer equivalent we have now to broadcast quality standard definition would be DVD. DVD is almost identical to the quality that broadcast quality videotape would give you, so that gives you some idea of how far video technology has evolved, at least as far as the standard definition side of things go. So the big problem that we run into here with shows from that era is the vast majority of them, even though they may have been shot on film, the vast majority of them no longer have their film elements in existence anymore. The only versions of those shows that exist are on the standard definition videotapes, the final edited masters. The only complete versions of those shows that exist are on standard definition master tapes. Now, in some cases, film elements have been discovered where they were found, in the hands of private collectors or in warehouses stored away or what have you. Now, one of the examples you gave was Gem and Transformers and G.I. Joe. In the case of all three of those, film prints do exist. However, here's the problem. They are film prints that are work prints, meaning they're full of mistakes. They're full of errors that were later corrected in the editing process for the broadcast version. So the only actual fully correct, complete broadcast versions that exist are the standard definition master tapes. Now, in terms of Gem is actually a really good example of that because you can see quite clearly what the difference is in terms of not only in terms of quality but in terms of completeness. The Rhino sets of Gem were actually made from the 35mm work prints. So you'll notice that the quality is a little bit sharper, colors are a little bit brighter. However, there's also a ton of mistakes. Some sequences of unfinished animation, some coloring mistakes, where hair colors are the wrong color, which I'm sure you'll agree is pretty important in Gem, and things like that. Characters moving when they shouldn't be, or moving in the wrong way, or things out of alignment when they should be fixed. Now, normally in the production process, what they would do is they would get these work prints back from the animators. They would review them, transfer everything over to not digital, but to analog videotape. And then they would make a list of things that they wanted redone, retakes as they call them, and they would send that list off to the animators and say, yeah, we need these shots redone because they weren't done correctly. So then what they would do is wait for those retakes to come in. They would get the retakes and then edit them into the final versions of the episodes, and then that's what we would see on the air. So the problem is the 35mm film prints that were found of Transformers, Gem, and G.I. Joe are all incomplete, incorrect, unfinished work prints. So yes, while the quality is considerably better than the broadcast tape versions, the completeness is not. So in the case of Shout Factory's Gem set, Shout Factory opted to go with the 1-inch broadcast master tapes, favoring completeness and correctness over quality. So yes, the quality of the Rhino sets is a little bit higher because they went from the film prints, and theoretically you could put those on Blu-ray, but in order to properly put them on Blu-ray in proper complete form would actually require either A, tracking down those retake sequences on film, which likely no longer exist. Quite frankly, it's a miracle that the work prints exist at all. Or B, actually going in and physically reanimating those sequences to correct them, which could be done digitally, but then it becomes a case of cost versus potential profit. And with a niche show like Gem, which, let's face it, it does have a huge fan base, but it's nowhere near as big a fan base as Transformers or G.I. Joe, I really don't see that kind of thing happening. You're only going to see that kind of thing happen with really high-profile stuff. Perfect example, what they're currently doing with Star Trek The Next Generation, where in that case they actually did keep all the old film elements, even though the original show was all done on standard def videotape. It was like edited on standard def videos, shot on film, edited on standard def videotape, with all the post-production effects done on standard def videotape as well. So they found all the original film elements minus, a few seconds of footage here and there, but they found the vast majority of them, enough that they've actually been sitting down and reconstructing every single episode from scratch to prepare Star Trek The Next Generation for Blu-ray. That is not something you should by any means take as something that's going to happen with everything. It won't, because it's really down to a matter of economics. Well, there's basically two factors. I mean, first off, the higher quality of source elements need to exist. If they do not exist, then there's nothing you can do. Standard def is as good as it's ever going to be. The other thing is, if the film elements do exist, are they complete? If they are complete, great. Just transfer them straight over, as in the case of shows like the original Star Trek. The original Star Trek, 60s show, the reason this could be put on Blu-ray is because it was done entirely on film. Back in the 60s, everything was done entirely on film. Filming, editing, mastering, all post-production work, the whole works, all done on film. Same goes for The Prisoner, another 60s show, entirely done on film. So in those cases, it's really just a matter of taking the old film prints, cleaning them up a bit, and then just doing a nice high-definition transfer. Easy. But the vast majority of the 80s and 90s shows simply cannot be done in high definition. It's not a matter of technology. It really isn't. You have to understand the limitations of technology, and limitations that simply cannot be overcome. If all you have is a standard definition master, then that's as good as the quality can ever possibly be. You cannot, there is no technology that exists or that will ever exist to magically create quality and create definition out of thin air. Okay, it's not possible. The kind of technology that has evolved over the past few years is simply, we're able to transfer film to digital form much better than we used to be able to 10 years ago. That's really the extent of the evolution. Otherwise, technology really hasn't changed that much and isn't going to change that much, other than, we'll get a little bit better at cleaning things up. But again, bottom line is, it comes down to how good the quality of your source is. So if your source is standard definition, it can only ever be standard definition. There's no way around that. The only benefit to putting shows like that on Blu-ray would be to put more episodes on disc. And you could bump up the bit rate because you have more space, so you're not as limited by the space on DVD. But but in terms of taking standard definition stuff and turning it into high definition, sorry, not possible. You can upconvert it, but all that's doing is making it a little more palatable on a high def screen. It doesn't actually give you any additional resolution. It just puts it into a format that's a little more comfortably compatible with high def TVs. But it's still, at the heart of it, it's still standard definition. You can't create more detail out of thin air. One of the examples you give, and I really need to clarify this because you brought it up a couple of times and I think you're a bit confused. Justice League, you were saying, but it was made in the early 2000s. That was before Blu-ray and high definition. Wrong. My parents actually got their first high-definition TV in 2000. Justice League was made, and high-definition was in development, like well into development by that point. It wasn't entirely ready to go, and we didn't have a lot of high-def TV channels or anything like that. But long and the short of it is, Justice League was made in high definition, and that's why they were able to put it in on Blu-ray. If you listen to the commentary tracks on this, they actually talk about that quite a bit, that they basically made it with forward thinking in mind. They knew that high definition was coming, and they wanted their show to be ready for it. So even though it was made full frame and then cropped for widescreen presentation, it was filmed widescreen safe, so that even though the whole thing was done in a 4:3 frame, it was still done in high definition. It's still high definition resolution. So then what they could do is just crop off the top and bottom to fill the widescreen image. But really, if you want the full image, get the Blu-ray, because the Blu-ray gives you the full frame image as it was originally shot, just pillar box on the sides. But I can assure you, according to the creators themselves, this was done from the ground up in high definition with the future of television and home video well in mind. Gotta know, these guys work in the industry. They know where the industry is going, and they know what's coming. So they wanted Justice League to stand the test of time, so they made it in high definition from day one. This was the first one they actually did in native 16:9 resolution. This was done 4:3 and then cropped for widescreen presentation. But both most definitely done from the ground up in high definition. And that's why they were able to put them in on Blu-rays, because they were high def to begin with. So it was actually a pretty easy transition for them to do. So this begs the question, what about the other stuff that they've done for that, like Superman, Batman, things like that? Do film prints exist for those? Quite possible. Warner Brothers seems to like to hang on to stuff in the archives a little bit more than some of the smaller animation studios did back in the day, so it's entirely possible that they may have film prints kicking around for those old shows. But again, this is the exception. This is not the rule. The vast majority of shows that you're talking about will never appear on Blu-ray. At least will never appear in high definition on Blu-ray, because the source elements simply don't exist. One of the ones you talked about was Beast Machines. Now in this case, these will absolutely never be in high definition, because in order to put them in high definition would mean re-rendering the entire series from the original source files, and there's no way in hell these things have the fan base or profit potential to justify the expense and time of doing that. Absolutely no way. The thing to bear in mind is these are all digital shows. They are completely limited by what their resolution is, to the pixel. The DVDs that we have now basically represent these shows 100% accurately to the original source elements, to the pixel. To force that into a higher resolution is not going to give you any better quality. It's not going to look any better, and there's absolutely no benefit or reason to do it. I mean, these were rendered at 720 by 480 and 720 by 576 resolution. That's it. That's as high as it goes. You can't go any higher than what it is. So, anyway, and the same goes for all CG shows done in the, 90s, basically. They were all done in standard definition. Stuff like Reboot, Beast Machines, Beast Wars, Roughnecks, that's all those shows. They were done in standard def. They were only ever meant to be shown on standard def TV. They were not done with forward thinking in mind. They were done as products of their day, either to sell toys or just whatever, or they just didn't have the budget or time. Also, bear in mind, computers were not as fast back then either, so it took a long time, as it were, just to render standard def stuff, never mind rendering high def stuff in that era. It would have been insane, just the time and processing power required. And then you take more modern shows like Wolverine and the X-Men. This, of course, was done in high def from the ground up, and all modern shows really now are done in high def, and if they're not, well, whoever's making them is being very silly indeed. So really, it's a case-by-case basis. You really can't make just sort of a blanket statement saying, oh, everything's going to be on Blu-ray and in high def eventually because technology is evolving. It's like, well, yeah, technology is evolving, but I don't think it's evolving in the way you think it's evolving. Yeah, in the case of Justice League, it was put on Blu-ray because it was high definition to begin with. Yeah, they were just thinking that far ahead. Even though Blu-ray was still 6 years away, high definition had already happened and was in the process of happening, and they'd been talking about high definition easily since 10 years earlier. I mean, the first I heard about high definition as being the next big thing was like in the early 90s, and apparently it was actually in development since the early 70s. So they'd been working on it and talking about it and developing it and figuring it out for a very, very long time before it actually hit the market. You look at other shows, like things like X-Files and Millennium and whatnot. I mean, they went high def in like the late 90s. So even before, or at least they went widescreen. I don't know if they actually went high def, but they at least went widescreen. So they're at least preparing for it in terms of the aspect ratio. Anyway, hope that clarifies a few things. I'm sure we'll do more videos on the subject at some point. But yeah, I hope that clarifies a few points, at least in terms of some of the specific examples you gave and why some are possible and some aren't. And you can't really just sort of say that everything's going to be possible because this was or that was. That's just not the case. I mean, in the case of the things that are on Blu-ray, they're on Blu-ray because they have the source elements and, or the demand to justify the cleanup process of going back and rebuilding it and whatnot. I'm hoping that maybe we'll see X-Files at some point because it'd be nice if they had the original elements for X-Files and could give it like the Star Trek Next Generation treatment. They would that's another case where they'd have to rebuild it from the ground up using the original films. But yeah. Anyway, yeah. Hope that clears things up, buddy. Alrighty, I will talk to you again whenever. Hope you enjoyed this response. Take care, man. Later.